gonna do a clap just to sync up audio and video.
Okay.
Now I think we're ready to go.
Was that the clap?
That was the clap.
Okay. Well, hi. Welcome to ARRM's very first podcast. My name is Johnny Tvedt. I am the Policy and Engagement Manager for ARRM, and I've been here for about 2 years. And with me, well, I'll just let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Megan Petersen. I am the communications manager here at ARRM. I have been here since last May.
For like 2 years, we've talked about doing some kind of podcast that will help our members really keep up with everything going on in the world of ARRM, whether it's at the state capitol or otherwise. And we hope this is a good way to do it. But because this is our very first time doing this, our very first episode, just setting some expectations. Uh, so why are we doing this? Why not just keep it on the blog?
Because we're big fans of doing things in multiple forms. So big fans of, some people like to read, some people like to listen. The visual we think will be exciting as well. A little bit more content on our YouTube channel. I think we're also hoping to reach more of the general public. I think right now is a great time for disability services to be putting ourselves out there. There's a lot of focus on us right now for various reasons. So the more kind of positive that we can put out there, the more education about what we actually do in disability services, in home and community-based services, I think the better. So yeah, what better time? And when you have a couple of millennials on staff that really like to talk, might as well find an outlet for us.
They always say millennials, when you hit a certain age, you just end up on a podcast. And I can now confirm that that's true.
We've avoided it till now.
I've avoided it till now, but here we are. And I think that's a great jumping off point to talk about some of the things going on in the world today, in the world of disability services. And what we're going to talk about as this podcast develops will probably change over time. But as we begin, it's really hoping to run down the news, any developments, and reminders that ARRM is doing a lot of things out there, and we want to bring attention to it, make sure folks are paying attention as well. But with that, the legislative session
It's coming up.
upon us. I don't know if you can do sound drops, but like some sort of drum beats or like thunder cloud noises would be nice. But let's talk about the legislative session because it's kind of a beast. It's hard to understand everything that goes on in the state legislature. Specifically the calendar for it, because it's weird. Minnesota has part-time legislators, which is important to remember because they are not always able to plug in, I think, the way our members of Congress can plug in. So the legislative session runs between February to the end of May. They can call special sessions after that, but really the time they're plugged in is throughout the spring and the end of winter. After that, a lot of them go back to their other jobs, their families, their lives outside of the state capitol. So the time to act is limited, um, which means we got to get on our horse and get some bills passed through. So we want to talk a little bit about how ARRM approaches the legislative session to the best of our ability, because that's what you're here for. And it starts in the summer, even though that's the summer the year before. So we prepare for this for a long time. And at ARRM, all of our bill ideas come from members. They submit ideas. They talk about it in committees. ARRM has a variety of committees that, host these discussions. And then they get voted on by the amount of importance or relevancy or impact they'll have. And those top ideas will really kind of distinguish themselves from the rest. And then those get turned into bill language, which then gets turned into actual bills. And then we find legislators who are willing to sponsor them. And then from there, we head into session. And I'm skipping a lot of parts because Sarah does a billion things alongside Zach, our contract lobbyist. So I'm simplifying this as much as I can, but that's kind of the order of operations.
Mhm. Can you talk a little bit about, because we're kind of on a biennium system as well.
We are.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the Minnesota state legislature has a constitutional obligation to balance the budget, the state budget, which is a fancy way of saying we got to know what we're paying for and how we're paying for it. We can't run a deficit. We can't go into a year with, a lot of money left unaccounted for. Uh, so a biennium cycle means that there are 2 years in a cycle. The first year is setting that budget. Where is money going? How much money does each kind of section of our society that the state oversees, how much money is dedicated to that? And what money is going where?
And we did that last year.
And we did that last year. So Minnesota set its budget last year. Um, for those in disability services, they probably remember we took a big pay cut um, in the amount of $1 billion over 4 years. And this is the first year where, following that pretty significant pay cut, all we can really do in the second year of the biennium is set policy. So, what that looks like is bills that typically don't have a cost, which means there's a lot of language in statute that gets changed, a lot of ideas put forward that don't necessarily call for spending. And that's what ARM's bringing forward this year for the most part. So, a little bit about the committees, because ARM deals with kind of the same cohort of legislators on a regular basis. And that's called the Human Services Committee. And it's a great time. And everyone there is lovely, and we get along, and everyone agrees on everything, and nothing bad ever happens.
Absolutely.
Just kidding. Yeah. So, Human Services Committee actually, for all the joking, like, is pretty bipartisan compared to the other committees. Obviously, we're in this political climate that is not always conducive for bipartisanship, to put it lightly. And in the human service committees in the House and the Senate, because even though we're not Congress, Minnesota state legislature still divides House and Senate. Um, they tend to work pretty well together. It's not always perfect. They don't agree on everything, but they do a pretty good job of setting realistic expectations and focusing on things that really matter. And of course, there's exceptions to that. But in the Human Services Committee, in the House, there's 9 Democrats and 9 Republicans because we have a split in the House that's 50-50, which means they have to collaborate to do anything. Um, and that means you really have to work with both sides of the aisle. No matter what bill you're bringing forward, it's got to have a little bit of support from both sides. And in the House, those committees are chaired by Representative Schumacher and Representative Mohammed Noor. Uh, and they are great to work with. They are very collaborative. And ARM has a good relationship with both those guys. And then the Senate, it's chaired by Senator John Hoffman, who we are lucky to have in our circle and continue to have in our circle. We're thankful for his health, and that's everything that occurred over the summer is, obviously terrible, but it's great to have him back and in good spirits.
Okay. So, committee, what does that look like? What's the process like?
Committee is a little bit different in the House and the Senate. So in the House, we meet in the mornings at 8:15. I think that's like Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. It's like 3 days a week, early in the morning. The first person I see every morning is our contract lobbyist Zach Eichton's glowing face and our legislative director Sarah Grafstrom. But We go to the state capitol. Right now, the House, all those committees are kind of meeting in random rooms because their building is under construction. But this one's in the Capitol first floor. We go in. Usually, there's a lot of other spectators there or people there to testify on behalf of a bill. We sit around a big circular table where all the Republicans are on one side, all the Democrats are on the other. The chairs are at the head, and House Research and the committee aides are kind of alongside them. So it is a big production. It's not like five people just sitting in a room listening to us testify on behalf of things we want to see. There's a lot going on. Um, and people will come and sit at the dais and testify on behalf of a bill, assuming their bill has a hearing that week. So we get notified ahead of time that ARM's bill will be heard in session that day. So when we go, oftentimes we'll bring a member with us to talk about the merits of that bill. So if it's a bill that's, has to do with IHST, we'll bring a provider who knows a lot about that world and who can really speak in favor of why that needs to be preserved or why the caps need to be removed or what have you. And then someone on ARM staff will also typically testify with it. Usually that's myself or Sarah or oftentimes Ken. Um, but someone on the policy team will often be alongside them. And if you're interested in testifying on behalf of an ARM bill, feel free to reach out. It's possible that we're not always going to need a testifier, but it is something where we like to add new voices to the room. And you can always have more than one testifier.
Yeah. And I would assume that um, legislators prefer hearing from people in their districts or constituents rather than, say, an association like ARM, or maybe it's a little bit of both since we kind of represent providers all around the state. That's helpful. But I think it's really powerful when a legislator knows, like, oh, this is somebody who votes in my district and, is advocating for this particular issue.
Yeah, and because ARM is a statewide association, and there's only 18 members of the House on that committee, it's possible that we have a lot of providers in those districts that they represent. So it is helpful to get folks who have their rep up on the committee. It's also just important to get the experts on there. Who knows the most about this topic and can speak to its benefits and why it should be preserved or why something else should be fought against. It's really about getting the right voices in the room at the right time.
Yeah. And IHST for the uninitiated, individualized home support, so it's training.
Correct.
And that's a huge policy priority for ARM this year. So we'll be discussing that
Yeah,
throughout
that
the
definitely
session.
won't be the last time we talk about that. That's going to be one of our largest priorities. It was something that came out of last year's legislative session where the amount of hours that one could utilize that support was capped. Um, so we'll talk more about that, but
Yep.
stay tuned. Um, so when you testify, it's a bunch of legislators just looking at you. Uh, if they get bored, they'll just start playing on their phones, which is fine. Just kind of remove that distraction. And after you testify, a handful of them might ask a couple questions. They might have nothing to ask. They might be pretty satisfied with the testimony. And then they will often either lay it over for consideration, which means we've talked about this. That's great. Let's pause before we do any other action. Or it gets re referred to another committee if it's a bill that has jurisdiction in a few different areas outside of human services. That's something that can happen. It's not super common with ARM bills, but we have had to go to other committees in the past. And when it gets laid over, a lot of things can happen in the interim. Legislators look at the bill more. Maybe they have more questions later on. Things can be amended, things can be taken out. If it turns out that a bill is going to have a significant cost, sometimes things just have to get removed. And that's kind of the back and forth we play with the state legislature, both in the House and Senates, all year until they meet the House side and the Senate side and their conference committees. And they determine kind of the final outlook for those omnibus bills, they're called.
Awesome. So beyond just testifying um, before committees, obviously, and voting, we know it's an election year, and so I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point as well. How can members get involved?
There's a variety of ways members can get involved, and that is kind of what my role at ARM is all about: is getting our members, our grassroots program, involved in the legislative process. So a few ways to do that. One, of course, just stay informed. Listen to my annoying voice on this podcast, um, and make sure you're reading all of the emails you get from ARM and just stay up to date. But beyond that, we do things like action alerts. We do things like Disability Services Day at the Capitol, which is March 24th. That's our gigantic rally where people come, make noise, we hear from speakers, and then you can meet with your legislator about some of the bills that ARM has. Uh, Registration for that is on our website, but it's just one of many ways you could get involved. The other is just making sure that if an action alert comes out or there's another grassroots events, and we're always trying to add more events, but if you see that and it's something that interests you, sign up for it. Or if it's an action alert, make sure to utilize it. Action alerts are usually very quick and simple ways to send some kind of targeted message to your legislator about the issues that we deal with. Uh, so anytime you see that on the Advocacy Center page on ARM, make sure you give it a look.
Um, so what to expect in the coming weeks from the podcast? We wanted to just give a broad overview today and kind of introduce ourselves and the podcast and iron out some of the kinks that I'm sure will happen in post production. Um, but we anticipate next time talking about our legislative agenda and some of our priorities, some of our main talking points, all of that, for next time. And then after that, it'll be the session, and we'll see where the podcast takes us then. But if you want to stay up to date with us in between podcasts, if you're an ARM member, you're getting our weekly email digest every Monday. So make sure you're tuning into that. That'll have our action alerts. That'll have anything links to things that we want you to know and want you to have. We also post in the open forum quite a bit, so any member resources will get posted there and in our resource library on the website. If you're not an ARM member, but you're a community member, a person served, family, anything like that, just an interested party, you can follow us on our socials. We're ARM or ARM.mn pretty much everywhere. That's all linked on our website as well, which is arm.org. Um, and if you have any questions, if you have anything you really want us to talk about on the podcast, feel free to email us. I think the best email for that would probably be questions@arm.org. So reach out to us there, and we might just answer your question on the podcast.
Yeah, and I think we are looking at having guests on to kind of share more about their perspective, share about their organizations or some of the work they do, kind of get a more in depth understanding on a few of these things.
Yeah,
And as we continue, obviously, this talk was about session, kind of at a broad overview. There's a billion other things that Sarah and Zach and the rest of the policy team work on every day. And we hope to kind of dive into the weeds on some of those going forward. But we also want to hear from our members and just hear their stories, what they do, and why this work is so important.
absolutely.
All right. So that's episode one.
That's episode 1.
Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully my voice didn't turn you off to the point where you had to throw your computer out the window. And we're going to keep refining this and making it grow and into something that's, we hope, is both informative, but also um, maybe a little entertaining. Who knows?
We'll see.
All right.
Cool.
Thanks, Megan.
Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in to the first episode of the Waiver Watch podcast produced by ARM. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, as well as our other social media. Be sure to tune in next week, and we will see you soon.